you're crossing a boundary. It's like it's an unsaid thing. When you offend somebody, it's an unsaid thing that you're not supposed to say. Comedians offend people. Do you have the option to not be offended by it? I don't know. I think the more you personalize something, the more you're going to be offended by it.
Is direct feedback bad? I think it always depends. It depends on the person, it depends on the goal, it depends on the intentions and the approach. I always said this, I want my intentions, my approach, and the result to all be good.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we help you level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed yesterday's episode, one of my favorite episodes of all time, episode number 1718, The Truth About Leaving People Behind. It just felt real, raw, authentic, vulnerable. Those are always my favorite episodes. Today, for episode number 1718, it is Freestyle Friday. If you're new and you haven't heard of Freestyle Friday before, we don't really know what we're going to talk about, so we don't have a title, but we do know it's Freestyle Friday. I kind of do have an idea for this episode. And the idea comes from the fact that I was on a podcast today. And the podcast I was on today was a podcast that you were on earlier this week, and you said, hey man, it's a really good show. You said, it's a really good show, two guys, it's a really good show. And I was like, awesome, cool, it's going to be a great interview. And it was awesome, awesome interview. It's called the A Squared Show. Mm-hmm. And one of the hosts said, and we'll dig into this because you'll see why it's kind of a weird conversation, but he said, what are your thoughts on this? I had a conversation with a psychologist once, and she said that life coaches are just failed psychologists. Does that offend you at all? And I laughed, and I said, well, first off, I'm not a life coach. I am a podcast coach. And I've been doing that for like the last 5 years. And I said, honestly, I'm sure there's a level of truth to it. I mean, the lower the barrier to entry for something, the higher the failure rate and the less skill it requires to get there. So I said a podcast is a really good example. How many podcasts are there out there that people are just, they have PhDs in yapaholics and they just talk? And they're really good at talking, but they're not doing anything else behind the scenes. That's super common. How many YouTube channels out there have like 3 videos and don't do it anymore? So I said, honestly, yeah, I think that's fair. I think that there's probably a lot of life coaches who aren't good at what they do. But I said, isn't it like that in everything? There's probably a lot of chefs that aren't good at what they do. I said, I don't know the stat, so please do not quote me and use this as the clip. But I think it's something like 50% of real estate agents never do a deal.
Yeah.
So there's really good real estate agents, and there's also really bad real estate agents. And that was kind of my point in the whole conversation, the whole back and forth about this. And he said, I really appreciate the fact that you didn't get offended. You didn't get upset with a question. And I wanted to talk today in Freestyle Friday about how much of being offended and getting angry at something is your choice. I don't know what would have happened if he said, I talked to a really high-level business coach one time who said podcast coaches are just people who couldn't make it as podcasters or something. I don't know if I would have reacted different. I probably would have said, well, the reason I can coach podcasters is because I did make it as a podcaster, but same thing. Yeah, I know it. I know a ton of, I've been on a lot of shows. And many of these people are also trying to be podcast coaches. When I talk to them, they don't know as much as I do because they don't have as many reps as I do. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean they can't help someone, though. That's the hard thing is even someone who is a life coach who has very little idea of how to coach and they've never done it before, if they've worked on self-improvement and they've worked on themselves, they know more than somebody who hasn't. So I think that's a very negative way to put it. But yeah, I thought it would be for an interesting conversation because there are certain things that I don't get offended at all by. There are certain things that I do get offended by. How much is that my choice versus just the external nature of hearing stuff that makes you feel a certain way?
Thinking about where I was.
I told Alan.
Did you tell me live or did you tell me before?
I don't know. Who knows even? Before. I think before.
Kev told me you're going to be surprised. And I remember thinking, And I wasn't at all until you did the twist of where I thought it was going versus where it's actually going, which is, do you have a choice of whether or not you're offended?
Yeah.
I think it's a duality. I think most things are, so I'm going to say that. I think you do and don't. You do have a choice, but not until you realize that you're offended. You ever have someone say, hey, I'm going to tell you something, but please just promise me in advance that you're not going to be offended?
Of course.
No. I'm not going to promise you I'm not going to be offended. What if I am
always
offended?
say yes. I always say yes. Every time.
You're so, you say,
Yes.
I won't, no matter. Yeah. And then when you do get offended, you have to suppress it.
Yeah.
The truth is you can't promise something like that in advance because you might be offended.
I was joking. It depends. Sometimes I'll say I'm willing to hear the feedback, but I can't promise I won't react a certain way or I won't feel a certain way or whatever. I was just kidding.
Hey, can you promise that you won't be offended? Hey, Kev, I think you're the fucking worst. Pardon my French for anyone who has kids in the car. We have fun. All right. And Kev, I don't think you're the worst.
Thank you.
Obviously
fun
joking.
With swear words. Yes.
Yeah. Every now and then.
We're going back to the beginning where we used to swear all the time.
Right in the intro.
Yeah.
Welcome to the
ideal.
mother effing hyperconscious podcast. A couple
Who knew?
bodybuilder bros. Who knew? Who knew? So, do you have a choice? The answer is yes, but only after you realize that you've been offended. You have to acknowledge the emotion first. What?
You think that's what it is?
Yeah, I've been trying to learn about emotional intelligence a lot in the last couple of years. And can you construct your emotions? Yes. CBT, it's thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a modality of therapy. It's the most common from my understanding. And it's awesome. It's if you think a certain thought, then you have a certain feeling about it. And then that feeling leads to a potential action. And you can take back control of that loop. And that's what the Hyperconscious podcast was. Change the way you think, change the way you act, change the way you live. A CBT podcast would be change the way you think, change the way you feel, change the way you act, change the way you live, which that's just too long of an intro.
You only get 3.
Too many. You only get 3 in marketing, which is why everything seems so easy when it's not. That's actually a pretty big breakthrough right there. But anyways, so the being able to construct your own emotions I've been working on. Can I choose whether or not I'm offended by something? The answer is no, because my unconscious and subconscious belief systems will be offended based on how much they do or don't match it. So if you say, Alan, you're an arrogant butthead, I wouldn't be offended because I disagree with you and I think that that's ridiculous. Now, if you said, Alan, I think a lot of times you come off arrogant to the audience because you don't understand what it's like to struggle with self-doubt, that would hit. That would land. Whenever we're offended by something, it means something about us. It's called personalization. We talked about this recently on an episode. And again, I can't take credit for a lot of this stuff. Emilia's the one teaching me most of this, and there's a lot of research and clinical studies out there about all this stuff. For me, professional development was my jam for the first part of my life, and I've really come up, I think, on more of the personal development and the inner work and the therapy and the mental health and all these terms. I didn't even know what they meant until relationship talks stuff. So personalization, I now see it everywhere. I mentioned it when you said I'm not going to do the jiu-jitsu competition on a previous episode for the new listeners. He said I'm not going to be doing jiu-jitsu anymore. I don't know why I can't say that. Jiu-jitsu anymore.
It's a tough word to say.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
So I'm offended. No.
Also, you are an arrogant butthead.
I didn't want to swear again, so I just said butthead.
I like it.
Jiu-jitsu. Got it. Nice. Kevin decided not to do that anymore. And then I immediately personalized that. What does that mean about the 10-pound and 10-week challenge? Yeah. Dude, I see people doing that all the time. Every time we make a business change, Kev's like, I feel you. I see you. What does that mean for me? That's a protection mechanism. You have to care about yourself. Someone's got to. And that's how you survived. That's how you got here. That said, emotional maturity is your ability to notice that and pull yourself out of yourself, observe it, and then act in a less personalized, offended way. So you can choose whether or not you're offended, but only after you get offended. And that's, I think, the truth.
I don't think I was offended.
Well, you probably just weren't offended. But there are times when you've been offended. and you couldn't choose not to be offended.
Me?
That's
actually
there's the example.
That's not the first time that somebody said that to me. I went on a podcast before, and they said the same thing. They're like, I don't really understand what life coaching is, and I feel like it's kind of a scam. And I was like, well, you can effectively say that about anything, right?
But Kev, what about the review that we got that said something about you
that we're a cult?
You were offended.
Yes, very.
By
offended.
But you can't choose whether or not you're offended by something. What you can choose is your reaction to it. And then over time, you can learn how to be less offended.
I feel like the things that don't offend you, it's because they're not like square hits. Remember you played Battleship? And I think a ship would be across like 3 different things. I'm thinking like it's just clipping the side. It's like, yeah, I mean, I was a life coach for lack of better phrasing, and I have nothing against that. Like, I know some people that are really good at coaching people on life. You're not a life coach, but you've been a life coach to me since, so I don't have any negative association with that. Shout out to any life coaches. I know maybe if I still was doing that, it would hit me in a different way. So it's like, well, I used to coach on that, but I don't do it anymore. But I think I'm trying to be very logical where it's like, you could say that about anything. You ever been to a really sketchy car dealership?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You ever been to a really nice car dealership?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. There's a lot of sketchy car dealerships for sure. When I take my car in to get serviced, I remember telling Alan, I was like, dude, I didn't want to leave this place. I brought my laptop. I worked there when my oil got changed and everything. It was like, they're bringing me water. Do you need anything? It's like, what? Yeah, coffee machine over here. Not every car dealership is a negative. It has to be a negative experience.
Yeah.
So I just think of it from, maybe it's 3 steps. Maybe it's 1, is it actually personal enough for you to be offended by?
Nice.
Right? That, what part, if it does offend you, what part of it offends you, and then what do you do about it?
Yeah.
Am I missing one? Sir?
It's so funny. The question of why am I offended? That's the only...
That was the second step in the 3-step system.
That's the second one. First, go through them again, please.
Now I don't remember. Now you've wrecked my flow. You arrogant butthead.
You arrogant
One
butthead.
was, does this actually offend me? Is it personal enough where I actually am taking on a piece of this?
Mm-hmm.
Second one is why? What piece of this offends me?
Nice.
What piece of this am I afraid is actually truthful and means something about me, hypothetically? And then the third one is, what do I do about the being offended?
Okay. Next layer of this conversation, love where this is going. Can you be offended and it's not anything about you?
Yeah. It could be something about something you care about, some person, place, idea, feeling, thought. Yeah,
like
100%.
you and I at the airport with that drunk dad and the kids. So Kevin and I were at the airport once, and I had to put in earplugs because I was fuming about this belligerent drunk father who wasn't helping the mom at all and was just being an entitled butthead.
Yeah, it was bad.
And you and I want to be male role models and try to be good people, and he just obviously wasn't. And I'm just going to say that. He wasn't. And we had to sit in that moment and go, okay, it's not our responsibility to save the world one drunken, belligerent father at a time. So we're just going to do what we do, and hopefully those kids are taken care of. But at the end of the day, we were offended even though it wasn't personal. But maybe it was personal because we grew up without dads, right? So who knows? Maybe that one was personal.
I don't know if I would say I was offended. I was upset.
Offended is, I'm offended, it's about me. Upset means it's something in the world that you think is unjust.
I would be offended if someone, like, nobody does this really, but I don't do well when people talk negatively about you. Like, that offends me because I'm connected to you. You know?
Would it offend you if you weren't connected to me?
I think if I knew... Let me look up the definition of offend. because we've said it so many times that I don't know anything anymore.
You remember back in the day when we used to say a word so many times?
Yeah,
Did that just happened?
Cause to feel upset, annoyed, or resentful.
Fair.
Commit an illegal act.
Oh, yeah, to offend. I think that offended is usually tied to identity, which is usually tied to belief about self. Not always, but
it's fair.
If I say you would benefit from exercising consistently because you're overweight, anyone who is overweight, who identifies as being overweight, might be offended. Hopefully they're not, because obviously I'm using this as an example, and I said it in a very virtuous-centered way. But I've been working really hard to how do you communicate truth without being offensive? That's an art.
Yeah.
Because there's a big difference between, hey, you're fat, and I think that you would benefit from exercising consistently because you are overweight. But even then, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just trying to help. There's a way to say things that are candid and truthful but aren't offensive. I've been working a lot. It's called nonviolent communication. You and I have a client who works on that, and she's been
wonderful client.
She's awesome, and she does a really good job with that. And when I'm coaching her, I can tell that this is so interesting. Shout out to Yvette, big fan. She said, "Don't worry, you can't offend me." And it was the first time I've had that said to me 1,000 times. Trust me, I might, and I'm sorry in advance if I do. I actually believed her. And the reason why I believed her is because she studies nonviolent communication, and she's so emotionally aware and intelligent that I know I'm not going to offend her. And even if I do, she's going to handle it well. So people say, "Oh, don't worry, you couldn't offend me if you tried." Really? The people who say that usually are the most unintelligent, emotionally unintelligent people.
Well, it's usually ego.
Exactly. It's
like
ego.
The reason I couldn't offend you is because you're going to immediately internalize it and then villainize me, and then you're going to ego up. You're going to get offended. You're just not going to react the way that I think you're going to react.
Yeah, or you're going to puff your ego out so much that it doesn't actually touch you because you have no vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think vulnerability is the opposite of ego.
So the verb version, the verb definition, to cause a person or a group to feel hurt, angry, or upset by something said or done. So even that I don't think is a really good. It's almost like, because one says to transgress the moral or divine law. I don't really know what that means. And then there's a quote by William Shakespeare. So that kind of makes sense. But it's almost...
Art thou offended thy?
Thy by thy. It's almost like, my favorite saying of all time, you're crossing a boundary. It's like, it's an unsaid thing. When you offend somebody, it's an unsaid thing that you're not supposed to say. Comedians offend people. Why? Because they say things that you just don't hear often. But that's their job. It's their job to break your pattern, and they say some pretty offensive stuff. Do you have the option to not be offended by it? I don't know. I think the more you personalize something, the more you're going to be offended by it.
The more insecure you are, the more you will be easily offended.
Yeah. And the more
you work through your insecurities and your pain and your trauma, I think the less offendable you become. When Yvette said, you don't worry, you can't offend me, what she really meant to say is, it's very unlikely that you're going to offend me. I've worked through a lot of my shit. Yeah. And you had already told me, because you recommended Yvette to me, and you said she's the sweetest and she's the easiest, most coachable. Yeah, I don't have to tiptoe, because normally you have to tiptoe around everyone's insecurities. And I understand. I mean, if I tell you my insecurity and you know I'm insecure about it, and then you're, hey, I don't know if you know this, of course, I'm going to feel attacked. So nonviolent communication with self and others, game changer. It's called a soft approach. There's a big difference between, hey, Kev, get your S together. You kind of suck at XYZ, versus, Kev, I've noticed that you want this goal, and it's really important, in my opinion, and I think you probably know this already, but maybe haven't heard it externally. I think it's important that you get more organized in order to achieve that goal. Because from my perspective, it's going to be really hard for you to actually get what you want in life if you don't come up in organization. There's a big difference. See how different those are?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, as a computer engineer, man, I was so direct.
Do you think that's bad to be direct? I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Like, whose problem is it if somebody's direct and I get offended? Is it their problem or is it my problem?
It's a great question.
You know?
I've contemplated that my entire life, adult life, because I was so direct. I realize now that I have a high self-efficacy, so direct feedback works well with me.
Yeah.
When you have high self-belief and you're not super insecure, direct feedback actually benefits you. I had a client once, I've said this before, who said, I want you to be as hard on me as you are on yourself. And when I told that to Emilia, she said, oh my God, she would die. And what Emilia meant by that, without actually saying it, is you can't be that direct with her. She isn't ready for that level of feedback.
Yeah.
And the reason why, and the best example of this is when you called me fat, you were being direct because you know it would help me. Whereas you know that wouldn't help someone who is insecure about their weight. Yeah. And I was delusional in your opinion. So, and you owned it too. Like, I'm fat too. Right? So that was also part of it. But
I think it was something along the lines of, Alan, you're fat. I am also fat, but I am not under the misillusion that the illusion that I'm in shape. I think you are more than I am. That was pretty much it.
And again, even saying the word fat is a trigger for most people.
For sure.
It's not for us. And that's the irony, is if we were actually fat, we would be offended by being called fat. And so the question was, is direct feedback bad? I think it always depends. It depends on the person. It depends on the goal. It depends on the intentions and the approach. I always said this. I want my intentions, my approach, and the result to all be good. NLU listener, what is happening? I just wanted to jump in here and let you know, if you want to get to the next level faster, we have a free virtual monthly meetup at the first Thursday of every month, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can connect with like-minded people and become a bigger part of this amazing global community. The link to register will be in the show notes.
But whose responsibility is it to try to cater to the other person? That's the hard thing. Like some people say, like, that's just how I am. But well, what if I am the gasoline to your water? Do we just accept that and say, look, one of us is going to be uncomfortable? Or do we, I guess it all comes down to, is it worth it? Is the relationship something worth working on, much like you and I have done? If you and I were working on a project together, it's like, all right, let's get this book report done, and that's it. It might not be worth overcoming all the things and the triggers and the opposites and the polarities that we have. But I think about that all the time. I can struggle at times with very direct feedback because I don't know what the person actually means. With you, I know what you mean. So I don't care. Just tell me. I'm good with that. Like, just tell me. I'm good at taking feedback from you.
Well, the other piece too is I also have built trust with you. And how many times have you gotten direct feedback that was wildly invalid from someone who doesn't lead by example?
A fair amount.
If someone else had said that, and they've never been in shape, and they don't know how to get in shape, and they don't know what it takes to be in shape, and they're just trying to be a bully, I would be offended. But you weren't saying it for that. So intentions matter. This is the question too, because do you walk through your whole life tiptoeing around everyone's insecurities? The answer is no. But do you walk around like a wrecking ball, not worried about anyone's feelings? You know those people? Well, I'm me regardless. I think that's crap, man.
I do too. I was thinking of that today.
I heard a clip earlier, and it was this woman who said, oh, don't worry about that. Like, everyone's responsible for their own emotions. Listen, you're responsible for your part in it. And if you go around offending everybody, just being you, there's a big difference between being authentic and being a dick. And that's the line. So if you're overly, I think it comes down to fear. If you're overly cowardly and docile all the time, and you're so timid and you can never offend everyone, and you're in this little protective bubble of, well, I don't want to offend anyone, so I never speak my truth, that's very different than someone who is belligerently ignoring think about it. You and I have said on this podcast, 1,718 episodes, I was going to say 25, apparently I round up, and how many times have we said something? I used to say this. I used to say, I want personal development to spread like COVID. And I do want personal development to spread. That's the mission. But I don't have to say it in a way that's so offensive. And so you mentioned that might not land with people. And so I stopped saying it. And now I tell a story about how I stopped saying it, so it's still me saying it, but it's not. And so at the end of the day, I think it's important. I think I would be arrogant to not have taken that feedback. There's other terms that there's one term that we use every now and then that is offensive to one of my clients. And it's the sicko thing. Now, here's the thing. And I told her, I said, I appreciate your feedback. We may or may not continue using it. And for those of you listening, what we mean when we say sicko, we mean someone who is just a grinder. They will just subject themselves to massive. And she knew what we meant. And we had a great dialogue about it. So if you're listening, we're good. But I remember saying, thank you for the feedback. I will now make my choice as to whether or not I use it. And she said, that's good. Awesome. And we're good. And she's a long-term listener. She listens every single day. And you still say it. I don't say it as much. That's my choice. Now, am I doing that because I'm fearful to say it? If that's the case, then I need to say it and have courage. Or do I agree with her? Right? And so I don't avoid saying it, but I don't say it as much as I used to because I think that some people might be taking it the wrong way. But you can take that too far. We need to like our own show. I like the sicko thing. Other people might not.
Yeah.
And if we want more listeners, do we have to overly cater to the listeners and then hate our own show? Or do we overly be ourselves and then just F the listeners? That's an overswing. And so I think we need to all find a mature center.
Well, isn't it? I think it's just and that's good. It's a really good piece of information to have because, like you said, then you can make your decision based on that. I think it's a question of how respectful can you be without losing yourself, or without feeling like you're self-sacrificing or abandoning yourself. Because I was literally, I didn't plan on talking about almost any of this. This is why it's Freestyle Friday. I was doing the dishes last night, and I was thinking of very similar, where would I ever be okay with just saying, I don't really care who this offends. This is just who I am. I don't know if I'd ever be comfortable, because one of my core values is respect. So the least I can do is take someone's trigger into consideration and then say, is it really that big of a deal if I never say that word again? No, I don't care. Cool, it's done. I probably will never say it again. If I do say it...
If it was important to you to say it, then that would be a different story.
Yeah, I think it would almost be, I'm disrespected that you won't allow me to say something that means so much to me.
And when she said the feedback, and I want to give this to her, she was mature about it in the sense of, and you don't have to change anything. It's your show. Because in my head, that's the same thing. I handled the feedback, and then I gave her feedback back, which is, we're going to do what we want to do on the show, and there is that level of, if you don't like the show and you are offended, you don't have to listen. But we are grateful that you listen,
For sure.
And we obviously want to take in feedback from our listeners. And this is why leadership is so hard. This is why growth is so hard. You have to take feedback, parse it out, figure out where it applies to you and your goals and your core values, and then somehow decide what to do next with that. And you will lose yourself if you're not careful. I mean, I have shaped myself, reshaped myself, misshapen myself to try to figure out. I mean, you and I have gone on this journey for a long time together, where I remember you and I sitting behind the scenes going, I don't even like our show anymore.
Yeah.
We've lost, what are we, a couple lecturers? And then there's the other thing of, we were interviewing guests and we're like, I don't even want to post that.
Yeah.
It's our show and we have to enjoy it, because if we don't, we can't do this every day. But it's not for us. What an interesting duality.
Super.
Yeah, we're not here for us. We're here for the listener. But we need to talk about what's inside as well. Otherwise, the content's going to be garbage. Imagine if it was, hey, Kev, I was studying earlier today about the politics of blah, blah, blah. And you were like, oh, really, Alan? I'm so intrigued by that when you're not. Yeah, you can't fake that.
It wouldn't be very good.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be very good.
You got to stay you, but the best version of you. Yeah.
This is one of the reasons growth is so hard, is because for the time between when you are not grown to grown, you look bad.
I know.
So in that moment, even in this conversation, it's like, I don't know. Are we going to say that? I don't know. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. I don't know. We'll make an effective decision. I probably won't, because to me, I feel like it's respectful not to, and I don't really care about it.
We got to come up with a new term, though, because we got rid of savage. We got rid of sicko.
We'll come up with one.
We'll come up with something. I need something that lands.
We'll come up with something. But you look like, if you don't ever try to look bad, you really lose the opportunity for growth. And I'm not just saying in the public space, just anything. Me going to the fire academy, never wanting to look bad, so never learning effectively anything physical, not good, very bad. And then when it mattered, I looked really bad. But when you look stupid in a minute, it's really hard, because you feel bad. You assume people think you're stupid too. You assume that's how people are going to look at you forever, because some of those people might not be around for your growth. And that's the hard thing, is all the people who are just there for the interim between when you make a mistake and when you fix it, they think you're the mistake forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the reasons growth is so hard. And again, when I say mistake, I'm not saying you said something wrong on a podcast. I just mean in general. If you make a mistake and you don't do something to the level you want to do it, that's one of the reasons putting yourself out there for growth is so challenging, because it is vulnerable to say, yeah, you know what? You might be right. Yeah, you might be right. Maybe I do say that word too much, or maybe I do say this thing too much, or maybe that does offend people. When you admit that you're wrong like that, if you admit that to somebody that isn't emotionally intelligent, they can really use that against you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a scary place to be. For sure.
And then the next layer is, even if they do use it against you, it is what it is. I took the high road.
That's fair.
And are you proud of taking the high road? And I think this is where virtue comes in. Last thing, there's a virtuous road that you know. And virtue is universal. All the rest of this is nuance. Sicko, bother you or not. Virtue is, how do I articulate things in a way that maximizes the probability of positively impacting others without sacrificing truth and candor. And the virtuous road is always there. It takes so much. There's a part of me that's so annoyed. Seriously. It's like, Alan, do you have to be that virtuous that you can't kill this mosquito? Seriously. Honestly, that's who I aspire to be. And so I'm going to have to grab the mosquito, put it in a jar, bring it outside. Now, that's who I've chosen to be, and that's the only way I've been able to be fulfilled. I've tried the alternatives. They don't work for me. And so whatever your core values are, there's a virtuous road. And there's vice and virtue. The vice is arrogance, and arrogance is always a vice. It's never a virtue. Compassion is always a virtue.
Is virtue doing the right thing? Is that what it means?
It means,
at the simplest level?
Yeah, it means doing the collective good, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Virtue. We could easily do this. I know we don't have time, but greed, vice.
Right.
Humility, virtue.
Where's cheeseburger?
It's in the middle.
I was gonna
Depends.
say, don't you immediately just say it's a vice, because it might not be. Could be a healthy
then there's the whole thing of, are we supposed to be carnivores? Could we, the cows? There's a million things. But the point is that's where it gets wonky. Because for each of us, we have our own belief systems. I personally, this is my personal belief, I believe we are supposed to be carnivorous. I don't have a problem eating a cheeseburger. That is my moral compass. Now, does that mean there's no merit to some of the things that happen to cows in the production and all that? Of course not. That's not what I'm saying. But we overswing these things. And where do you draw the line? So that's the philosophical discussion. And
Just be a good person. Just be a good person.
That's the goal.
Just try to be the best person. When Tara and I were in Scotland, the first day we got there, it rained, and we were walking by. There's like a lot of stands. There's like a lot of gift shops that have stands outside, like in the overhang, and they had fridge magnets. And Taryn accidentally hit it with the umbrella, and one fell off and broke. It would have been very easy just to keep walking.
Mm-hmm.
But I picked it up, and I went inside, and I said, hey, we'd like to pay for this because we accidentally broke it. And we ended up getting a couple other ones, too, because it was like buy 3, get 1 free or something. It's like, well, we already got one that's broken.
It's the high road.
Well,
that's the high road. Yep.
Only you can make that decision for you. Only you can make that decision for you.
When I was a teenager, I put sunglasses in my pocket and walked right out of Target.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and that was the low road.
I was waiting
and
for you to say
the low road.
Then I brought them back. You didn't bring them back.
No.
Never brought them back.
No, used them. Yeah. And there's the shame comes up. Shame comes up, and it should. I think shame is a moral compass that we all have. It's how you handle it, and no one's perfect. And I've taken the low road many times in my life. I'm very grateful nowadays to be able to say I don't take the low road almost at all. But I used to, for sure.
I think everybody.
And I was around a bunch of people who took the low road too. So it's all the water you're swimming in. Where we grew up, there was a lot of low road going on. So we didn't exactly have great influences. But where does that expire? At what point do you stop blaming your environment and set the new standard, right? So, again, we could do 1,000 episodes on this. But
yeah, what an interesting Freestyle Friday. Who knew?
You want to see the sunglasses? I'm kidding.
You got them on you?
No.
It would have been really bad
that
if
I bought, though, at the convenience store for the road trip. Dude.
$6.99?
Yeah, man.
Of course.
Yeah. Full UV protection, though, apparently.
Yeah, of course. I lose my sunglasses so much, but it's cool because I buy like a pair on Amazon that's $6.99. Like I've never had a nice pair of sunglasses because I will lose them. They just disappear. They're like socks. They just disappear. I don't know where they go most of the time. Or I break them. I remember at Next Level Hope Foundation last year, I shattered mine. They just like fell off and exploded. I was like, well, that kind of sucks. But yeah, that's why I get $7 sunglasses. Tomorrow, for episode number 1719, what's the purpose of your deepest pain? We talked a little bit about pain today, but we'll talk about that. If you have not yet joined our private Facebook group, Next Level Nation, please do so if you are looking for a group of good humans. If it doesn't come across, really what we aspire to be is the best men we can be. And I think what we're trying to help a collective group of humans do is just be the best versions of themselves, whatever that means. It doesn't mean you have to read 1,000,000 books. It doesn't mean you can't be yourself. It just means you want to get a little bit better and you want to try to become the best version of you. So that is what this whole thing is about. We have a Facebook group all about that, Next Level Nation. A link will be in the show notes. What do you want to talk about?
I want to say we have a 10-pound, and please, I did a post. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I have. Nice. A lot of people are in. I love it.
Awesome.
Shout out to them.
So I said this, it was disclaimer. Don't do this if your mental health is in jeopardy. Don't do this if your circumstances don't allow you to do it. Kevin and I are starting a 10-pound in 10-week challenge. As of today, it's 10.2 weeks. August 10th is the weigh-in. I'm going to create a Google Sheet, and I posted in Next Level Nation Kevin and I's best previous physiques. Mm-hmm. So you can take a look. When we talk about how we've let fitness fall, we're not trying to be overly hard on ourselves.
Yeah, no, take a look.
We
You'll
just
know.
don't look.
You'll know.
Yeah, you'll know. And so at the end of the day, let's all be at our best. So don't use our standards. Don't use Kevin's standards. Use your own standard. And so you can do 10 pounds if you would like to. You can do 5 pounds. You can do whatever you want. But please send me in the comments in Next Level Nation. And if you're not in Next Level Nation, join. Comment, because I'm going to create a Google Sheet of names, first names only, start weight, end weight. And then we're all going to weigh in on August 10th, and it'll be public accountability, #community power. We're all better together. And we can hold each other accountable. So name, which obviously on Facebook, your name will be there. Current weight, goal weight. That's it. Super simple. If you comment, I'll put it in the G Sheets, and then we'll give a shout out, first names only, to everybody who does it.
Is there any way to do it anonymously? Say somebody wanted to do it anonymously.
Yeah. If you want to do it anonymously, privately message me on Facebook, and I'll just put Anonymous 101 or Anonymous 102. Or Anonymous 123, that kind of thing.
I think that. 177.4 today.
Nice. Dude, yesterday, 190 even, 5 pounds, mostly water, and then 193 today. Nice.
Still?
Yeah, 195, 190, 193. I'm having it round to the nearest pound.
Now, here's the thing, though. When you weighed... Yeah, I know you know what I'm going to say. I can tell. When you weighed yourself at 195, you had eaten that. That was after you ate?
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Okay, so that's... Okay.
Yeah, I had eaten. I was hydrated. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
I'm just checking. I got to make sure. I need to know the data. I didn't. I weighed myself. My weights are pardon TMI, but just in my trousers first thing in the morning after I've used the restroom.
Mine have been a little sporadic, but I'm not doing that on purpose.
Oh,
I would like to get to a place where it's apples to apples, but when I did the 195.4, which was my start, I had eaten, fully hydrated. When I was 190 even, I was fasted all day and pre-workout, hadn't eaten in like 12 hours. I had a protein shake in the morning, but at the end of the day, yeah. And here's the lesson real quick. If you weigh in 10 pounds lower than your current beginning weight, you did it. So we're not going to do, are you dehydrated or not? Is it the morning? What time was it? Kev, you can do that. I'm not doing that.
But I'm not putting that standard on anybody else. I was just teasing you.
Yeah, I will weigh in at below 185.
It's just
whether I'm hydrated or not.
It's just a pride thing for me of like, because I could literally just eat whatever I want for the next 70 days and then just not drink water for a couple days and go in the sauna and I can make the weight. But I don't want to do that. I want this to be, for me, the reason I want to do this is because I want to facilitate a long-term shift.
Yeah, same.
And even if you lose 8 out of your 10 pounds or 7 out of your 10 pounds or 3 out of your 5 pounds or whatever it is, that's a really good clip in the right direction. So that's what we're aspiring to create. All right, we're going to go.
I don't intend on doing the marathon dehydrated
I
again
hope not.
to try to make weight. That is not my goal. But if I have to, I will do it.
Maybe it'll be cycling, some sort of riding a bike or something for many miles or something. Who knows?
We'll see. I'd like to do it legitimately this time.
I would also like that for you because I don't want you to do any damage to yourself. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we do not have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Stay centered. Next Level Nation.